For 42 years, I've been my son's safety net, his advisor, his bank, his biggest defender. Then I overheard him tell his friends I'm just a walking checkbook with annoying opinions. My name is Robert Holloway. Most people call me Rob. I'm 67 years old, retired high school principal, living in Portland, Oregon. Spent 32 years shaping teenagers, guiding parents, watching kids grow into decent adults. Though I knew something about character development, turns out I didn't know my own son. December in Portland means early darkness and cold rain that seeps into your bones. I'd been down in my woodworking shop, a converted garage where I've been building a chess table since October. Retirement gift to myself. That Thursday evening I came back inside earlier than usual. My hands were cold, and I needed coffee. The house was quiet except for a voice upstairs. Brandon's voice, coming from the guest room where he's been staying since September. The door was half open. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just standing in the hallway about to head to the kitchen when I heard him laugh. Dude, it's like living with a walking checkbook that has annoying opinions attached. I stopped moving. Nah, he won't say no, Brandon continued. He never does. I just gotta wait out the lecture about responsibility. Then he writes the check. Every single time. My hand was still on the banister. I remember that detail. The smooth oak under my palm, worn from years of use. I stood there like I'd been nailed to the floor. Dad'll come through, Brandon said. He always does. Just gotta play it right. I don't remember walking to the kitchen. I don't remember making coffee. But I remember sitting at the table with a cold mug in front of me an hour later, staring at nothing. 42 years. Diapers and Little League and homework help and college application essays. Late night talks about girls and career paths and what kind of man he wanted to become. Birthday parties and graduation ceremonies and that moment in the hospital when the nurse first handed him to me. 8 pounds, 6 ounces. And I promised I'd always be there. Walking checkbook. If you're watching this from somewhere else tonight, do me a favor. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I want to know I'm not alone in this. And if this story sounds familiar, if you've ever wondered whether you're appreciated or just used, maybe subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. Brandon's 42 now, moved back in September after what he called a career setback. Some consulting firm let him go. He needed time to regroup and explore options. Joyce, my wife of 44 years, said we should support him. Family helps family. I agreed. But standing there in that hallway, listening to my son reduce 4 decades of fatherhood to a financial transaction, something shifted. I'm not a dramatic man. I spent my career staying calm while teenagers tested every boundary. But that night, staring at cold coffee, I realized I didn't actually know my son, not the real Brandon. Just the version he showed me when he needed something. I needed to know the truth, and I had exactly 5 days until Christmas to find it. I spent 35 years telling parents not to enable their kids, then realized I'd been writing checks on my son's character that kept bouncing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Joyce was breathing softly beside me, peaceful, while I lay there doing math in my head. Not pleasant math. The kind that adds up to a total you don't want to see. The business investment came first. Brandon was 28, had this idea for a consulting firm with 2 college buddies. Needed startup capital, $15,000. I wrote the check. The firm folded in 7 months. Never saw a dollar back. Never even got a full explanation. Just, the market wasn't ready. And we learned a lot. 2 years later, the apartment lease. I co-signed because his credit was temporarily problematic. He missed 3 months of rent. Forgot, he said. Got busy. The landlord called me, not him. I covered $4,200 before I even knew there was a problem. The car down payment. The graduate school tuition. He wanted an MBA to pivot his career trajectory. I paid $18,000 over 2 years before he quit. 3 classes short of finishing. Said the program wasn't aligned with his professional goals anymore. Added up, $50-something thousand across 14 years, maybe more. I stopped counting at some point because counting felt like doubting, and fathers aren't supposed to doubt their sons. Joyce always said the same thing. He just needs time to find himself, like he was lost in some philosophical wilderness instead of failing to show up for his own life. I never said that out loud. Joyce loved Brandon with a fierceness that didn't leave room for criticism, and I loved him too. Still do. That's what made this so hard. Here's the thing. I spent 3 decades as a high school principal. I knew entitled kids. I watched them manipulate their parents with practiced ease, sat in conferences where I had to explain to well-meaning mothers and fathers that their child wasn't struggling, wasn't misunderstood, wasn't going through a phase. Their child was using them. I had a speech I gave, must have delivered it 50 times over the years. Don't confuse support with enabling. Support helps someone stand. Enabling them keeps them from learning to walk. The irony was acid in my throat. I'd spent decades helping other people see patterns in their children's behavior. Professional observer, trained to spot manipulation, entitlement, arrested development, and I'd missed it in my own son. Or maybe I hadn't missed it. Maybe I'd seen it and chosen not to look too closely. That's worse, isn't it? Knowing and pretending not to know. Christmas was 5 days away. Brandon had been living in our guest room for 3 months. Every week there was a new excuse for why he hadn't found work yet. Every week there was something he needed. Gas money, phone bill, just 100 till next week. And every week I gave it to him. Sitting in bed at 2 a.m., listening to rain hit the windows, I made a decision that frightened me and excited me in equal measure. I was going to find out who my son really was, not the version he performed when he needed something, the real Brandon, the one who existed when he thought I wasn't watching, wasn't listening, wasn't there to rescue him. I just needed a way to become invisible while staying in plain sight. By morning, I had my plan. This Christmas, I decided to disappear. Not physically, but vocally. I wanted to see who my son really is when I can't speak up. The plan came to me somewhere between 3 a.m. and dawn. Simple, testable, completely believable for a 67-year-old man in December. I would lose my voice. Not really, of course. But Brandon wouldn't know that. Neither would Joyce. Starting Friday morning, I'd wake up with laryngitis, severe enough that speaking was impossible, common enough that no one would question it. I'd cite it as viral, something that needed to run its course. Doctors would say rest, fluids, time, no talking. 5 days, Friday through Tuesday, Christmas Eve. 5 days of complete silence while I watched and listened and learned who my son became when I couldn't guide him, couldn't lecture him, couldn't speak up at all. No advice means no lectures Brandon could tune out while waiting for the check. No verbal financial discussions he could manipulate with the right words and timing. No fatherly wisdom he could pretend to consider before doing what he wanted anyway. Just observation. I'd communicate through writing when absolutely necessary. A notepad. Basic responses. But only for essential things. I wanted minimal interference. Maximum truth. The question was simple. How does Brandon behave when Dad can't perform his usual role? When the walking checkbook doesn't come with annoying opinions attached, when there's no voice to say yes or no, just silence to fill with his own character. I sat with this plan as the sky lightened, turned it over, examined it from every angle the way I used to examine student disciplinary cases, looking for flaws, ethical problems, unintended consequences. It felt manipulative. I won't lie about that. Deception. Even silent deception, wasn't something I practiced. Built a 32-year career on honesty and direct communication. This was neither. But after 4 decades of unconditional support, after $50,000 and countless hours and 42 years of being there every single time he called, I deserved the truth. I deserved to know whether my son loved me or just loved my checkbook, whether I'd raised a man or funded his extended adolescence, whether walking checkbook with annoying opinions was phone bravado or his actual experience of fatherhood. The test wouldn't hurt anyone. 5 days of silence. If I was wrong, if Brandon showed genuine concern and care, I'd confess everything Christmas morning. We'd laugh about it eventually. If I was right, I didn't let myself finish that thought. Friday morning, I came downstairs and told Joyce my throat hurt. Scratchy, I said. Probably nothing. She made me tea with honey. By noon, I was whispering. By dinner, I showed her the notepad with "Can't talk at all, hurts too much" written across it. She touched my forehead, concerned. No fever. I shook my head, pointed at my throat, shrugged. These things happen. Viral. Just need rest. Brandon was out that evening. Didn't come home till after 10. Found me and Joyce watching television with captions on. "What's wrong with Dad?" he asked her. Not me. Her. "Lost his voice completely," Joyce said. "Poor thing can't make a sound." Brandon looked at me. I looked back. And I swear, just for a second, I saw something flicker across his face. It looked like relief. The first thing my son did when he saw I couldn't talk, he looked relieved. Saturday morning, day 1, I sat at the breakfast table with my notepad beside my plate, trying to act natural while Joyce fussed over me. Hot tea, honey, zinc lozenges, all the things you do for someone you love when they're not feeling well. Brandon appeared around 10, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair uncombed. He shuffled into the kitchen, saw me sitting there in silence, and stopped. "Damn, Dad," he said. "You sound terrible." "Well, you don't sound at all." He smiled at his own joke. I managed a small nod. Joyce handed him coffee. "The doctor said complete voice rest. Could be a week or more before it comes back." "That sucks," Brandon said, but his voice didn't match the words. There was something light in it. Easy. I watched him pour cereal, scroll through his phone, sit down across from me without making eye contact. The silence between us felt different than it used to. Comfortable for him. Heavy for me. Joyce suggested he help me drive to the pharmacy for prescription throat lozenges the doctor had supposedly recommended. Brandon checked his phone, frowned. "Can't Mom do it? I've got plans." Plans? Joyce asked what kind. Brandon said just some stuff he needed to take care of, nothing important, but he really couldn't reschedule. The plans turned out to be video games in the guest room. I heard them through the ceiling most of the afternoon. Gunfire and explosions, and Brandon shouting at teammates through his headset. I started keeping notes. Not obvious ones. Just observations written in a small notebook I kept in my woodworking shop. Numbers and times and patterns. Saturday afternoon count. 0 offers to help with anything. 0 questions about how I was feeling beyond that first flippant comment. 3 requests for money. The first came at lunch. Brandon needed gas money, $40. Joyce gave it to him from her purse. The second came at 3. He was hungry, wanted to grab food out. Could I Venmo him? I wrote, "How much?" on my notepad. He said 30 should cover it. I sent it from my phone. The third came at 7. Could I spot him for groceries? He'd pay me back next week. Another 50. Joyce made excuses each time. He's still getting settled. Job hunting is stressful. We should support him during this transition. I wrote nothing, said nothing, just watched and listened and learned. By Saturday night, my silence felt heavier than it had that morning, and we still had 4 more days until Christmas. Day 2 of silence, and my son was already calculating how to use my disability against me. Sunday morning came too bright. Joyce insisted we needed to start Christmas preparations despite my condition. She had traditions to maintain, family rituals that couldn't wait for my voice to return. I nodded and grabbed my coat. The mall was exactly what you'd expect 2 days before Christmas. Crowded, frantic, wrapped in forced cheer. Joyce navigated through the chaos with her shopping list, while I followed, still silent, still watching. I'd already bought Brandon's gifts weeks ago. It took me time to pick them out. A leather portfolio, genuine Italian leather, $400, for the consulting business he claimed he was building. Rich caramel color, brass corners, his initials embossed on the front, the kind of thing a serious professional carries. The second gift I'd found at an estate sale in November, a vintage Omega watch from 1976, the year I graduated high school. Cost me $350 after negotiation. Had it cleaned and serviced. It kept perfect time. Thoughtful gifts, expensive gifts, the kind you spend time selecting for someone you believe in. Brandon had come along to the mall. His choice. He walked beside us through the crowds, hands in his pockets, looking at everything except his parents. We passed the Apple store. Brandon slowed, stopped, stared at the display. The new MacBook Pro, he said to no one in particular. That's what I really need for client presentations. He looked at me. I looked back, just saying, if we're doing Christmas gifts. I shook my head and pointed to my throat. The universal gesture for, can't talk about this now. Right, Brandon said. Convenient timing. The words hung there. Joyce pretended she hadn't heard them. I wrote nothing. We kept walking. Back home that afternoon, I went to my workshop. I needed space. I needed to not be in the same room as my son while I processed what convenient timing meant. Did he suspect? Or was he just annoyed that my silence prevented the usual negotiation dance? Him asking, me hesitating, him explaining why he needed it, me eventually giving in. Through the wall that separated my shop from the house, I heard Brandon's voice. Video call, probably. His girlfriend, Sarah. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. Not really. But the wall was thin, and Brandon talked loud. Dad's got that stupid silent thing going, he said. Laryngitis or whatever. Kinda works in my favor, though. Can't lecture me about responsibility and making good choices and all that principle bullshit. He laughed. Sarah said something I couldn't hear. Nah, he'll still write checks, Brandon continued. Just have to do it quietly now. Honestly, might be better this way. I stood very still in my workshop, holding a piece of sandpaper I'd been using on the chess table. My jaw was so tight I could feel my teeth grinding. Might be better this way. My silence wasn't teaching him anything. It was just removing the obstacle between him and my wallet. The annoying opinions part was gone, but the walking checkbook remained. Available, useful, quiet. I stayed in that workshop until dinner, sanding wood that was already smooth, trying to understand when my son had stopped seeing me as his father and started seeing me as a resource to be managed. Joyce called me for dinner around 6. I washed the sawdust off my hands and went inside. Brandon smiled at me across the table. Feeling any better, Dad? I shook my head. That sucks, he said, and took another bite of Joyce's pot roast. We still had 3 days until Christmas. My silence didn't just reveal my son's character, it shifted his manipulation to my wife. Monday, day 3. I came downstairs around 7, my normal time. Joyce was already in the kitchen, still in her robe, making coffee. She looked tired. Didn't sleep well, she said when she saw me. Kept thinking about Brandon. I raised my eyebrows, a question. He's just stressed, she continued, answering something I hadn't asked. The job loss hit him hard, Rob. He needs time. I reached for my notepad, wrote carefully. Brandon hasn't asked about my voice since Saturday. Joyce read it, sighed. He's not good with medical things. You know that. I wrote again. Third money request yesterday, $140 total. Rob, she set down her coffee cup. He's our son, I wrote. Has he applied anywhere? Joyce looked at the notepad for a long time. Then she turned back to the coffee pot and didn't answer. Brandon appeared around noon. I was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. He walked past me to the refrigerator, grabbed orange juice, and drank from the container. Joyce would normally say something about that. She didn't. Mom, Brandon said, I need a favor. Of course he did. There's a networking dinner tonight. Some guys from my old firm. Could be a lead. He paused. I need about $60 for my share. Joyce pulled her purse from the counter. I watched her dig through it, saw her pull bills from a small, zippered section, her emergency fund, the cash she kept for groceries and gas between ATM visits. She handed it to Brandon. He didn't count it, just folded it into his pocket. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. He left the kitchen. I heard the guest room door close upstairs. I reached for my notepad. Joyce saw me and shook her head. Let me handle this. 3 words. Quiet, but firm. A line drawn. I wrote anyway. That was your grocery money. I know what it was, Joyce said. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the spot where Brandon had stood. I'm his mother, Rob. Let me handle this. The test was creating collateral damage. That's what I realized, sitting there at the table with my newspaper and my silence and my wife pulling cash from her emergency fund. I'd removed myself as Brandon's target, and he'd simply adjusted his aim. Joyce was softer. Joyce was accessible. Joyce would give without questions because that's what mothers do. I'd spent 5 days proving my son would use whoever was available. That afternoon, I wrote Joyce a longer note, left it on the kitchen counter where she'd find it. I'm not trying to control this. I'm trying to understand it. Do you see what I see? When I came back an hour later, the note was gone. In its place was Joyce's handwriting on a different piece of paper. I see a son who's struggling. You see a son who's failing. Maybe we're both right. That night at dinner, Brandon talked about the networking event, how promising it was, how one guy mentioned a consulting opportunity that might be perfect. Really grateful you helped me out, Mom, he said. Could be a game changer. Joyce smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I looked at my wife across the table and understood something I hadn't before. She knew. Maybe not the depth of it, maybe not the full truth, but she knew our son was using her. She just didn't know how to stop being his mother long enough to stop him. We had 2 days left until Christmas, and I still hadn't decided what I'd say when my voice returned. My son's girlfriend accidentally revealed the truth. He'd been lying about losing his job for 6 months. Tuesday, day 4, Sarah arrived around 5, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a nervous smile. Brandon's girlfriend of 2 years. Nice woman. Worked as a dental hygienist in Beaverton. I'd always liked her. Joyce had insisted on cooking a real dinner. Wanted to do something special, she said. Despite everything, I suspected she wanted witnesses. Wanted someone else in the house to dilute whatever tension had been building between the 3 of us. I sat at the head of the table, silent as usual, while Joyce brought out roasted chicken and vegetables and homemade rolls. Sarah complimented everything. Brandon poured wine. We could have been any normal family on any normal Tuesday. How's work going? Joyce asked Sarah, making conversation. Busy, Sarah said. Holiday season means everyone wants to whiten before family photos. She laughed, turned to Brandon. I'm just so proud of you for sticking with the agency despite all the stress. The table went quiet. I felt my attention sharpen like I used to when a student said something revealing during a disciplinary hearing. What agency? The client demands are intense, Sarah continued. But at least the commission structure is better than last quarter, right? Joyce's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Brandon's face did something complicated. Babe, he said carefully, they don't need to hear about work. But I'd already grabbed my notepad, wrote in large letters, You have a job? Sarah looked at the notepad. I looked at Brandon. Her face went white. Oh my God, she whispered. You didn't tell them. Brandon laughed, but it sounded wrong. Forced. It's complicated. I underlined the question on my notepad, pushed it across the table toward him. Dad, let's not do this now. I tapped the notepad. Hard. Joyce found her voice. Brandon, do you have a job? It's not, technically yes, but technically? Joyce's voice was climbing. What does that mean? Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. I'm so sorry. I thought you knew. Brandon said he'd told you about switching to commission only. Commission only? Joyce repeated. Not laid off. No, Sarah said quietly. Not laid off. He changed positions within the same agency 6 months ago. The base salary is lower, but the commission potential is better. He's doing fine, actually. Had a good quarter in... Sarah. Brandon's voice was sharp. She stopped talking. The chicken was getting cold. Nobody moved to eat it. I wrote another note. 6 months? You've been lying for 6 months? Brandon pushed back from the table. I can explain. I waited. So did Joyce. So did Sarah, who looked like she might cry. I didn't want the lecture, Brandon said finally. About stability and benefits and playing it safe. You would have told me not to take the commission role. You would have said it was irresponsible. So I said I got laid off instead. The silence that followed was enormous. Joyce stood up. I walked to the sink, stood there with her back to us, gripping the counter. All the money, she said softly. All the help, because we thought you had nothing. I needed help getting established in the new role. You lied to us. Joyce turned around. Her eyes were wet. You looked at us every day and lied. Sarah stood. I should go. Nobody stopped her. We heard the front door close a minute later. Brandon sat at the table, staring at his plate. I sat across from him, holding my notepad, my silence suddenly feeling less like a test and more like a weapon. Joyce looked at both of us. I can't do this right now. She left the kitchen. We heard the bedroom door close upstairs. Just Brandon and me, father and son, liar and walking checkbook. One day left until Christmas. When my son finally admitted he'd been lying for 6 months, he didn't apologize. He justified it by listing everything I own. Tuesday, Christmas Eve, the last day of my silence. Brandon avoided me all morning, stayed in the guest room with the door closed. I heard him on the phone once, voice low and urgent, probably talking to Sarah, probably trying to explain why he'd hidden a fundamental truth from his parents for half a year. Joyce came downstairs around 10. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. I want answers, she said. Both of you. Living room. Now. I grabbed my notepad. Brandon emerged from the guest room slowly, like a teenager called to the principal's office. We sat, Joyce on the couch, me in my reading chair, Brandon perched on the ottoman like he might need to run. Start talking, Joyce said. Brandon looked at me, at my notepad. Hard to have a conversation when Dad can't. Then I'll ask the questions. Joyce cut him off. Did you lose your job or not? Not exactly. Yes or no, Brandon? No, he exhaled. I didn't lose it. I took a different position, commission-based. The base salary is lower than before, but the upside is better if I perform well. I wrote, how much lower? Brandon read the note. About 40%. I wrote, and the commissions? I'm building up to them. It takes time. There's a learning curve. I wrote, so you took money under false pretenses. That's not fair. I underlined false pretenses 3 times. Brandon stood up. You know what? Yeah, I lied. I lied because I knew exactly what you'd do, exactly what you're doing right now. The disappointing principal routine. The lecture is about stability and responsibility and making good choices. I wrote, so lying is better? Sometimes, Brandon's voice was rising. Sometimes avoiding the lecture is worth it, because you've got plenty, Dad. You're retired with 2 pensions and the house paid off and money in the bank. What does it matter if I need help sometimes? Joyce made a sound. Small, hurt. I stood up slowly, wrote very carefully. You think my retirement means you're entitled to it? I think family helps family. Brandon shot back. I think after 42 years, I shouldn't have to beg for help or justify every dollar or feel like I'm failing some test you've had in your head since I was born. I wrote 1 word. Honestly? Brandon read it. Something in his face cracked. What? I tapped the word. Harder. Honestly? His voice was smaller now. You want to talk honestly? I nodded. Fine. He sat back down. I looked at his hands. Honestly, I didn't think you'd notice. Or care. You've always written the checks before. Why would this time be different? Joyce was crying now, quiet tears running down her face. I wrote my last note of the experiment, because this time you lied, and you used your mother, and you justified it with my assets. That's not family helping family. That's theft with a relationship. Brandon read it, didn't respond. I need air, he said finally, and left through the front door. Joyce and I sat in the wreckage of Christmas Eve. What do we do? She whispered. I couldn't write an answer to that. Not yet. That night, alone in my workshop, I made a decision. Tomorrow was Christmas. Family would come. There would be dinner and gifts and the performance of normalcy, and my voice would return. I had things to say, my real voice. Finally, things I should have said years ago, before the checks and the enabling and the slow erosion of accountability. Tomorrow, my son will hear who his father really was, not the walking checkbook, the man. Christmas morning, my son thanked me for $750 in gifts with the same energy most people reserve for junk mail. The house smelled like cinnamon and false hope. Joyce was up at 6 making her traditional cinnamon rolls from scratch. Butter and brown sugar and the kind of effort you put in when you're trying to hold something together through sheer force of ritual. I came downstairs at 7. She looked at me, exhausted. We hadn't talked since Brandon left yesterday. He'd come back around midnight. I'd heard the front door, the stairs, the guest room door closing. No apology, no conversation, just the sound of avoidance. "Merry Christmas," Joyce said. It came out hollow. Brandon appeared around 9, showered and dressed in a sweater I'd bought him last year. He looked almost normal, almost like the son I used to know before I started paying attention. "Merry Christmas," he said to both of us. Casual, easy, like the previous day hadn't happened. I nodded, still maintaining the silence. 1 more hour, maybe 2. Sarah wasn't there. Joyce had asked about her earlier. Brandon said she'd driven to Seattle to spend Christmas with her family. Last-minute decision. I suspected the decision had been made Tuesday night, after she accidentally detonated Brandon's lie. Smart woman. We went through the motions, sat around the tree Joyce had decorated 2 weeks ago. I opened gifts with coffee and cinnamon rolls that tasted like sawdust in my mouth. Brandon unwrapped the leather portfolio first, ran his hand over the embossed initials. "Thanks, Dad. This is really nice." His voice had the enthusiasm of someone opening socks. Polite, empty, performative. The watch came next. He held it up to the light. Vintage. "Cool, thanks." Cool. I'd spent 3 hours at that estate sale, examined a dozen watches, negotiated price, had it serviced and cleaned, wrapped it in special paper. Cool. Joyce gave him a cashmere sweater, charcoal gray, his favorite color. He held it up, said "Perfect, Mom," and set it aside. Then it was his turn. He handed us a gift bag, a generic red and green store logo visible on the side. Inside, wine and cheese basket, the kind you grab at the last minute from the grocery store end cap. The clearance sticker was still on the bottom, $14,999, marked down from $24,999. Joyce pulled out the crackers and brie, smiling at her mother's smile. "This is lovely, honey." I saw the disappointment in her eyes. She covered it quickly, but I saw it. Brandon helped himself to another cinnamon roll. "These are amazing, Mom. You should make them more often." She makes them every Christmas. Has for 44 years. Around 11:30, a car pulled up outside. Joyce's sister, Margaret, and her husband, Tom. They came through the door with pie and wine and the kind of cheerful noise that fills empty spaces. "Merry Christmas." Margaret hugged Joyce, then me. "How's the voice, Rob? Joyce said you've been silent for days." I shrugged, pointed to my throat, smiled apologetically. "Bet you're enjoying the break from Rob's dad jokes." Tom laughed. The comment hit differently than he intended. A reminder that my voice was considered a nuisance, background noise, annoying opinions attached to a checkbook. We moved to the dining room. Joyce had set the table with her good china, the set we got as a wedding gift 44 years ago, ham and potatoes, and her famous green bean casserole with the fried onions on top. Everyone took their seats. The conversation started flowing. Margaret talked about their daughter in Denver. Tom complained about traffic on the drive over. Brandon smiled and laughed and played the role of charming nephew, and I sat there, watching him perform. As my son entertained the family with lies, I cleared my throat and said the first words I'd spoken in 5 days. "I can talk just fine." The meal was everything Joyce had worked for. Perfect ham with pineapple glaze, roasted potatoes with rosemary, green beans that crunched just right, homemade rolls that steamed when you broke them open. Margaret kept the conversation moving, asking questions, filling silences, doing what she'd always done in our family, managing the emotional weather. "So Brandon," she said, passing the potatoes, "Joyce mentioned you had a rough year. How's the job search going?" I watched my son's face. I watched him calibrate his response. "Getting there," he said smoothly. "Few promising leads. The market's tough right now, but I'm staying positive." Tom nodded. "The economy's brutal for everyone. When did they let you go?" "Back in September." Brandon didn't miss a beat. "Downsizing. You know how it is." I cut my ham into smaller pieces, chewed slowly. I watched my son lie to my family at my Christmas table. "But you're keeping busy?" Margaret asked. "Staying active?" "Absolutely. Networking, updating my portfolio, taking some online courses." Brandon took a sip of wine. "Actually, we had a great meeting last week. Consulting firm in Beaverton. Could turn into something." Every word smooth, practiced, believable. This was what I'd paid for, not just his living expenses, Not just the gas money and the phone bill and the just until I get settled checks. I'd funded his ability to lie so comfortably that even his aunt, a woman who'd known him since birth, believed every word. Tom turned to Joyce. You must be glad to have him home, even with the circumstances. It's been, Joyce searched for words. It's been interesting. Margaret caught something in her sister's tone. Everything okay? Fine, Joyce said quickly. Just worried about him. You know how mothers are. He'll land on his feet, Tom said confidently. Smart kid like Brandon? Someone will snap him up. Brandon smiled at the compliment. Appreciate the faith, Uncle Tom. The conversation moved on. Margaret's work in real estate, Tom's golf game, holiday plans for New Year's Eve, normal family chatter around a normal Christmas table. Except nothing was normal. I was sitting there silent, pretending to have a medical condition, watching my adult son weave lies through the mashed potatoes while his mother quietly fell apart. Joyce brought out dessert, pumpkin pie and apple pie, and Margaret's contribution, chocolate cream pie from the bakery she loved downtown. Everyone took slices. Coffee was poured. The conversation turned to memories of past Christmases, stories we'd all heard before, but told again because that's what families do. Brandon told the story about the year he was 7 and accidentally knocked over the tree. Everyone laughed. He was charming, funny, self-deprecating, in exactly the right doses. I thought about that 7-year-old boy, the one who cried when the ornaments broke, the one who helped me carefully put the tree back up while Joyce swept glass, the one who made me a card that said, "Sorry, Dad," in crayon. When did that boy disappear? When did he become this? As Margaret cut into her second piece of pie, I made my decision. I cleared my throat. Everyone looked up. Actually, I said, my voice strong and clear, I can talk just fine. The table froze. I looked my son in the eye and said, I faked losing my voice to see your true character, and I'm not cutting you off, but the bank is closed. Joyce's fork clattered against her plate. What? I can talk, I repeated. I could talk 5 days ago. I faked the laryngitis. Margaret and Tom sat motionless, confused. Brandon's face was drained of all color. I don't understand, Joyce whispered. Last Thursday, I said, keeping my voice calm and measured. I came upstairs early. Brandon was on the phone. I heard him tell his friends I'm a walking checkbook with annoying opinions. That's a direct quote. The silence was absolute. I decided to run an experiment. I wanted to see who my son really is when I can't guide him, can't bail him out, can't speak up. So I faked losing my voice. Brandon started to say something. I held up my hand. 5 days, I continued. 5 days of watching. You didn't ask about my health after Saturday morning. You asked your mother for money 3 times, money she pulled from her grocery fund. You complained that my silence was convenient timing when I wouldn't discuss buying you a new MacBook. Margaret's eyes were wide. Tom looked at his pie like he wished he could disappear into it. You told your girlfriend my condition might work in your favor because I couldn't lecture you. Then, on Tuesday, your girlfriend accidentally revealed the biggest lie of all. You didn't lose your job. You have a job. You've had a job for 6 months. Joyce made a small sound. Brandon stared at the table. Commission-based, I said. Lower base salary, but income nonetheless. You lied about being laid off so we wouldn't question why you needed financial help. You took money under false pretenses for half a year. Rob, Brandon started. I'm not done. My voice stayed level. 32 years of practice staying calm while delivering hard truths. Yesterday, when confronted, you didn't apologize. You justified your lies by pointing to my retirement savings. You said I have plenty, like my security gives you entitlement to it. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Tom studied his coffee cup. I spent 42 years being your father, your safety net, your advisor, your bank. I wrote checks for every setback, every opportunity, every emergency that somehow only affected you. $50,000 over 14 years, maybe more. I stopped counting. Brandon's hands were shaking. This morning you opened gifts worth $750, a leather portfolio I spent hours selecting, a vintage watch I had serviced and restored. You said cool and set them aside. Then you gave us a clearance basket from the grocery store with the sticker still attached. Joyce's eyes were wet now. I'm not cutting you off, Brandon. You're my son. That doesn't change. But the bank is closed. No more checks. No more bailouts. No more funding your extended adolescence while you treat your mother like an ATM and your father like an obstacle to remove. I looked at him directly. He couldn't meet my eyes. You're 42 years old. It's time to be 42 years old. Margaret and Tom sat frozen, witnesses to a reckoning they hadn't signed up for. I'm sorry you had to see this, I said to them, but I'm tired of pretending, tired of enabling, tired of being a walking checkbook. I stood up. Dinner was excellent, Joyce. Thank you for all your work. And I walked out of the dining room, leaving my family sitting at the Christmas table in the wreckage of truth. My son tried defending the indefensible until he saw his mother crying and realized sorry wasn't enough. I went to my workshop, closed the door, sat in the chair I'd built 5 years ago, and waited. Through the wall, I heard voices. Brandon's, rising and defensive. Margaret's, probably making excuses to leave. Tom's low rumble. Joyce crying. 10 minutes later, the front door opened and closed. Car engine. Margaret and Tom fleeing the disaster. Then footsteps. The workshop door opened. Brandon stood there, face red, fists clenched. You manipulated everyone. You played games with our family. I observed. I said quietly. You performed. You lied. So did you. For 6 months. That's different. How? He opened his mouth. I closed it. I tried again. You made Mom part of this. She didn't know. That's not fair. Neither is using her grocery money for your networking dinners. Brandon's anger deflated slightly. He looked lost. Young, despite being 42. I didn't think. He stopped. Started over. He couldn't finish. There was no defense. He knew it. Behind him, Joyce appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were devastated. Not angry. Worse. Disappointed. Brandon saw her face, and something shifted on his own. Mom, Don't. Her voice was quiet, but firm. Not to me. Not right now. Brandon looked at his mother. Really looked at her. Saw the woman who'd pulled cash from her emergency fund. Who'd made excuses while he slept till noon. Who'd defended him to her own husband while he lied to both of them. Then he looked at me. At the father who'd written $50,000 worth of checks. Who'd spent hours selecting gifts that earned the word cool. Who'd had to fake a disability to see his son's true character. I'm sorry, he whispered. The words hung there. Small. Inadequate. But possibly genuine. Sorry means nothing without change, I said. Brandon nodded slowly. What do I do? You prove it. You get a real budget. You pay your own bills. You stop taking and start giving. You become the man I thought I raised instead of the one I discovered this week. He stood there for a long moment, then nodded again. Okay, he said. Okay, now prove it, I repeated. He left the workshop. Joyce stayed. Did we break him? She asked softly. Or save him? I don't know yet, I said. But at least now we'll find out who he really is. She came and sat beside me, and we waited for the answer together. The morning after the truth exploded, my son woke up early for the first time in 6 months and started cleaning without being asked. December 26th, Boxing Day. The British call it that. Americans just call it the day after Christmas when everything feels heavy and used up. I came downstairs at 7, same as always. My routine. Coffee first, then the newspaper spread across the kitchen table. 32 years of waking early for school administration doesn't leave you. Retirement doesn't change your internal clock. Brandon was already there, sitting at the table, showered, dressed, at 7 in the morning. In 6 months of living here, I'd never seen him before 10. Usually it was noon, sometimes later. He looked up when I entered. Morning. I nodded, poured my coffee, and took my seat across from him, unfolded the newspaper. We sat in silence, not the fake silence of the past 5 days. Real silence, the kind that happens when two people don't know what to say, so they say nothing. 10 minutes passed. I read about city council debates and weather forecasts. Brandon stared at his coffee cup. Finally, did you really hate having me here? I looked up from the paper. Consider the question, the real question underneath it. No, I said. I hated watching you waste yourself. He nodded slowly. I looked back at his coffee. There's a difference, I added. Yeah, his voice was quiet. I'm starting to see that. More silence. But it's different now. Something settling between us, instead of building. Brandon stood up. I'm going to clean the living room. I didn't ask him to. Joyce hadn't asked him to. He just started. I heard the vacuum cleaner around 8. The sound of someone moving furniture, actually cleaning underneath things, instead of around them. The kind of thorough work you do when you're thinking while your hands are busy. Joyce came downstairs at 8:30, surprised by the noise. She stood in the doorway watching our son vacuum under the couch cushions. Brandon, she said. Morning, Mom. Just tidying up. She looked at me. I shrugged. We both watched him work. He spent the whole day on it, vacuuming every room, organizing the coat closet, taking down Christmas decorations carefully, wrapping each ornament in tissue paper the way Joyce does, carrying trash bags full of wrapping paper and boxes to the curb. Joyce followed him with her eyes, cautiously hopeful, the way you watch someone you love when you're afraid to believe they might be changing. I stayed reserved, didn't praise him, didn't acknowledge the effort beyond a nod when he asked where extra trash bags were kept. Words are easy. Cleaning a house is easy too, really. One day of effort doesn't undo 6 months of taking, but it was something. That night, after Brandon went to bed, Joyce sat beside me on the couch. Do you think? I don't know, I said. Too soon to know. But maybe? I looked at my wife. 44 years of marriage meant I could read the hope in her face, the desperate need to believe our son might be turning a corner. Maybe, I allowed. But actions matter more than apologies. And one day of cleaning doesn't balance 6 months of using. She nodded. I know, but it's a start. It's a start, I agreed. We sat there in our clean living room, in our quiet house, waiting to see what came next. My son finally asked the question I'd been dreading. Why didn't you hold me accountable sooner? And I had to admit my own failure. Joyce went to Margaret's that evening. Needed to process with her sister, she said. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't part of the explosion. That left Brandon and me alone in the house. We avoided each other for an hour. I went to my workshop. He stayed upstairs. But around 8, I heard footsteps on the stairs, then a knock on the workshop door. Can we actually talk? Brandon asked. I gestured to the chair across from my workbench. He sat. We were surrounded by furniture I'd built over the years. The bookshelf, the coffee table in the corner where I kept woodworking magazines. The chair he was sitting in, refinished oak from a yard sale, restored over 3 weekends 5 years ago. He'd never asked about any of it, never noticed the work. The job, he started. The commission thing, it pays less. The base salary is about 40% lower than before, but the potential is better. If I build the client base, I could make more than I ever did on a straight salary. I waited, let him talk. I took it because I thought it was a smart move. But then when it meant less money immediately, and you kept asking how the job search was going, I couldn't admit I'd chosen to make less. After all my talk about big career moves and success, I'd basically stepped down. So you lied, I said. So I lied. He looked at his hands. Every time something went wrong before, you wrote a check. Every time I failed, you caught me. I never had to sit with consequences, never had to figure out how to fix my own problems. This was different from yesterday's defensiveness. This was something else. I'm not blaming you, he said quickly. I'm 42. I made my choices, but I never learned to stand on my own because I never had to. I thought about my own father. A railroad worker, tough as nails, died when I was 50. I told Brandon about him. My first teaching job, I hated it. I wanted to quit after 3 months. Came to your grandfather, asked if I could move back home while I figured things out. I paused, remembering. He said, I raised you better than to quit because something's hard. Figure it out or don't, but you're not running home. What did you do? Brandon asked. Figured it out. Stayed 5 years. I learned to teach. Met your mother in that school. Brandon absorbed this. Then, why didn't you do that with me? The question hit like a punch, because it was fair. Your mother and I grew up during harder times. We both had fathers who didn't have much education, worked physical jobs, struggled to pay bills. When you were born, we promised ourselves you'd have it easier. I had it too easy, Brandon said. We failed you differently than our parents failed us, I continued. We wanted to protect you from struggle. We thought love meant removing obstacles. We were wrong. The workshop was quiet, except for rain starting against the windows. We gave you a safety net so soft you never learned to walk without it, I said. That's on us. But at some point, it became on you, and you chose to keep lying down instead of standing up. I know. He looked around the workshop. Really looked, maybe for the first time. Did you build all this stuff? Most of it. I never asked about it. No, you didn't. He sat with that for a while. I'm going to fix this, he said finally. Not overnight, not with one day of cleaning, but actually fix it. Words are cheap, I said. I know. That's why I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm just telling you what I'm going to do. You can watch and decide for yourself. I nodded. Fair enough. We sat there a bit longer, father and son, in furniture one of us built, and the other never noticed. It felt like a beginning, not of something new, of something we should have started years ago. I gave my son 30 days, specific terms, and one simple rule. Earn back what you took, starting with your mother's grocery money. The next morning, I laid out the terms, not as suggestions, as conditions. Brandon sat across from me at the kitchen table. Joyce stood at the counter, listening. We were doing this together this time. You can stay through January, I said. That gives you 30 days to find your own place. Brandon nodded, didn't argue. While you're here, you pay $400 a month for rent. You split groceries with us. You're third. No more free meals. No more treating this like a hotel. Okay, he said. You research and apply to at least one job opportunity every week, not for my approval, for your own development. But you'll tell me you did it because accountability matters. Makes sense. I'll offer advice only when you ask for it. I'm done lecturing, but I'm also done writing checks. No more money transfers. No co-signing. No emergency bailouts. What you earn is what you have. Joyce shifted slightly, but said nothing. We'd discussed this last night. She agreed, even though it hurt her mother's heart. Brandon looked at both of us. This is fair. More than fair, actually. One more thing, I said. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. The notes I'd kept during the 5 days of silence. Turned to a specific page. Your mother gave you money 3 times last weekend. $60 for a networking dinner, $50 for groceries, $40 for something else. I don't remember. She took it from her emergency fund, the cash she keeps for when she runs out of grocery budget before the end of the month. I watched Brandon's face change. He hadn't known, or hadn't thought about where the money came from. Mom, he started. Joyce held up her hand. Let your father finish. You owe her $200, I said. Not me, her, and not someday, this week. Brandon looked at his mother, really looked at her, saw what I'd been seeing for months, the woman who'd been sacrificing while he took. I didn't know it was your grocery money, he said quietly. Would it have mattered? Joyce asked. The question hung there, honest, painful. It should have, Brandon said. It should have mattered. Yes, Joyce said. It should have. Brandon stood up, pulled out his phone. A few taps. I just Venmo'd you $250. The extra $50 is interest. Or, I don't know, apology money. Joyce checked her phone, nodded. Thank you, she said. Her voice was soft, but her face was something else. Not forgiveness yet, but maybe the beginning of it. I folded my notes, put them back in my pocket. Those are the terms. You want to stay through January, you follow them. You break them, you find somewhere else to be. Are we clear? We're clear. And Brandon, I added, I meant what I said on Christmas Day. You're my son. That doesn't change. But I'm done being your safety net. From now on, I'm your father, not your bank. He met my eyes. I understand. For the first time in 6 months, I thought maybe he actually did. My son told me he wants to stop being my burden and start being my son. And for the first time in years, I believed him. 10 days later, New Year's Eve, Brandon had news. Found a studio apartment, he said over dinner. Starts February 1st. Already put down the first and last month's rent. Joyce looked surprised. That's wonderful, honey. It's small, really small, but it's mine. My name on the lease, my responsibility. He'd attended 3 job interviews that week. 2 informational, 1 serious. The serious one was for a junior account position, lower title than he'd had before, but stable salary plus commission. I told them the truth, Brandon said, that I'd been in commission only for 6 months, learned it wasn't my strength yet, and I wanted to rebuild with more structure. They appreciated the honesty. I felt something ease in my chest. Not pride exactly, more like cautious hope. The $250 he'd given Joyce was still in her purse. She'd told me she didn't need it right now, that knowing he'd paid it back mattered more than having it. But it was there. Real money, real accountability. That afternoon, Brandon had come to my workshop, asked if I needed help organizing. We'd spent 2 hours sorting screws and nails and sandpaper, talking about woodworking techniques, and he'd actually seemed interested. Asked questions about the chess table I was building. Could you teach me? He asked. How to do this? If you want to learn, I'd say. I'll teach you. He'd attended my veterans coffee group on Tuesday. Just showed up, sat quietly, listened to old men tell old stories. Afterward, he told me, I never knew you had a whole community I wasn't part of. You never asked, I'd said. I know. I'm sorry for that. Now, on New Year's Eve, we sat in the living room watching the Portland fireworks on television. Joyce between us on the couch. Family, trying to figure out how to be family again. As midnight approached, Brandon turned to me. I wasted years being your burden, he said. This year, I want to be your son. My eyes watered. 67 years old, and my boy could still make me cry. You've always been my son, I said. Now you're becoming a man. Joyce took both our hands. Hold them together. The fireworks bloomed across the screen, gold and silver against the dark Portland sky. I knew this wasn't Hollywood. Setbacks would come. Brandon might struggle, might make mistakes, might even fall back into old patterns sometimes. Change doesn't happen in straight lines. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. Real hope. Not the kind built on promises or apologies. The kind built on actions. 3 months after I faked losing my voice, my son paid for our anniversary dinner, and I nearly cried because he'd finally learned what I'd been trying to teach for 42 years. March in Portland. Rain against the workshop window. Steady and soft. The kind of rain that makes you grateful for shelter and hot coffee. Brandon moved into his studio apartment 6 weeks ago. Took him 3 trips in a borrowed truck. Everything he owned fit in a 12 by 15 space with a kitchenette and a bathroom the size of a closet. He didn't complain, just moved his stuff, set it up, invited us over to see it. The place was tiny, but clean, organized. It's perfect, Joyce had said, and meant it. Now he comes for Sunday dinner, not because he lives here, because he chooses to. He got the job, the junior account position with a stable salary plus commission. Not glamorous. Not what he'd once imagined for himself at 42, but honest work with honest pay. Every Thursday, he texts me, not asking for money, just sharing progress. Small things. Landed a new client today. Small account, but clean commission structure. Or, the interview went well. They're checking references. Last week was Joyce's and my 44th anniversary. We were planning to go to our usual place. Nothing fancy, just the Italian restaurant we've been going to for 20 years. Brandon called Tuesday night. I want to take you guys out for your anniversary. My treat. Joyce looked at me when she hung up. Did you ask him to do that? No. Do you think he can afford it? I don't know, but I'm not going to stop him. Friday night, he picked us up, drove us to a steakhouse downtown. Not expensive, maybe mid-range, but nicer than the Italian place. He held the door for his mother, pulled out her chair, ordered appetizers without checking the prices first. During dinner, he told us about his work, about learning to cold call again, about a mentor at the office who was teaching him better client relationship skills, about saving for a better apartment next year. He talked about Sarah, They'd gotten back together in February, slowly. She'd made him work for it, made him prove he'd changed. I don't blame her, Brandon said. I wouldn't have trusted me either. When the check came, he grabbed it before I could, paid with his card, his money. Thank you for 43 years, he told his mother. And thank you, he said to me, for finally making me grow up. I felt my throat tighten. 67 years old, sitting in a steakhouse in Portland, watching my son pay for dinner with money he earned himself, and I nearly cried, not because of the dinner, because of what the dinner meant. He'd learned, after 42 years of me trying to teach it, after $50,000 in checks, after 5 days of silence, and one Christmas confrontation, he'd finally learned the lesson. You earn what you have. You respect what you're given. You stand on your own feet before you ask someone else to carry you. On the drive home, Joyce held my hand in the back seat. Brandon drove carefully, talking about maybe taking a woodworking class in the fall. If you'd teach me, he added. I'd be glad to, I said, and I meant it, because the man driving this car wasn't the boy who'd called me a walking checkbook. He was my son, finally. If you've been your child's safety net for decades, ask yourself, are you helping them fly or preventing them from learning to stand? I want to talk directly to you now, the man watching this video. Maybe you're sitting in your workshop or your garage or your living room after everyone else has gone to bed. Maybe you're thinking about your own adult child living in your house or calling for money or making promises they don't keep. You're not alone. I enabled my son for 42 years because I loved him. That's the truth most of us don't want to say out loud. We write checks because we love our kids. We make excuses because we love them. We believe their promises because we love them. But love isn't writing checks to prevent struggle. Love is allowing consequences to teach what your words cannot. Those 5 days of silence taught me more about my son than 42 years of talking. Sometimes your presence isn't helping. It's preventing growth. Your voice isn't guiding them. It's keeping them from learning to think for themselves. Your money isn't supporting them. It's teaching them they don't have to support themselves. Here's the question I need you to ask yourself. Have you become your child's safety net or their launching pad? There's a difference. A safety net catches people when they fall. A launching pad pushes them upward. For years, I was catching Brandon every time he stumbled. I never let him hit the ground. I never let consequences teach their lessons. I never let him learn that falling hurts, but standing back up is possible. I thought I was being a good father. I was actually preventing him from becoming a good man. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you've got an adult child living in your house rent-free, if you're still writing checks for someone who should be standing on their own, if you're making excuses to your spouse about why it's different this time, let me tell you what I learned. It's never too late to establish boundaries, never too late to close the bank, never too late to say, I love you, but I'm done enabling you. My relationship with Brandon isn't perfect now. We're not some Hallmark movie family. He still struggles sometimes. I still worry, but it's honest now. When we talk, he's not calculating how to get something from me. When I help him with something, it's actual help, not a bailout. And honesty, I learned, is love's deepest form. I spent 42 years trying to protect my son from struggle. I should have spent those years teaching him how to handle it. That's what I'm doing now. Better late than never. So let me ask you the question that changed everything for me. What would your family reveal if you went silent? If you couldn't speak up, couldn't lecture, couldn't write checks? What would you learn about who your children really are? Maybe you need to find out. If this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me about your own situation. And if you found this helpful, share it with another father who might need to hear it. We're all trying to figure this out, but we don't have to figure it out alone. Thanks for listening to an old principal talk about the hardest lesson he ever had to teach. Before you go, I need to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to set boundaries with an adult child? What happened? How did it change your relationship? And if you know another father dealing with this, share this video. Sometimes we need to hear we're not alone in the struggle. Subscribe if you want more real stories about family, accountability, and the lessons we learned too late. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening.